This is Townsquare Sunday on 1420 WBSM, the place where people come together to talk about the good things happening in and around New Bedford.
Come together right now. Oh.
And now, the moderator of Townsquare Sunday, Jim Phillips.
Well, this is week 91 of Townsquare Sunday, a public affairs program that highlights organizations and individuals making a difference on the South Coast. I'm your host, Jim Phillips, and thanks for tuning in. When it comes to your personal agenda, housing pretty much tops the list, I would think. If you have rented apartments or other types of living spaces in New Bedford, you probably know some of the ups and downs in that process. My next guest has probably heard most of them. Christina D Fonseca is the executive director of SouthCoast Fair Housing, with offices at 257 Union Street in New Bedford and in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. She joins us today to speak about housing issues. Welcome, Christina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Christina, give us some brief history about SouthCoast Fair Housing. How did it start? How long has it been here? And what do you do?
Sure. So we founded SouthCoast Fair Housing in 2012. Based in New Bedford. Started very small, and we've slowly expanded, and now our service area includes the state of Rhode Island as well as Bristol and Plymouth counties in Massachusetts. And our mission is to eliminate housing discrimination and increase equal housing opportunities for everyone. And so what that looks like is we educate the public about fair housing laws and what their rights and obligations are under those laws. We also investigate claims of discrimination and advocate for improved policies so that housing opportunities are open to everyone.
Would you say you're a watchdog agency?
I would say that's a part of what we do, yes. Yes.
All right. What are the most common types of complaints that come into your agency?
So the most common complaint that we see is from families with children under the age of 6 who are having difficulty renting an apartment because housing providers, we find a connection in a lot of these cases where housing providers, the apartment's has not been made lead safe. And so the housing providers are hesitant to rent to families with young children because they either can't afford to or don't want to abate the lead hazards in the property. And so that results in families with children having limited housing opportunities. The other component to that is any family with a child under the age of 6 who also uses a housing voucher tends to get squeezed even more because those families, the policy of the housing voucher is that the apartment they move into has to have a lead certificate. And so there's even fewer apartments available for that. So those are our most common complaints.
Okay. So the apartments that still have lead, isn't the landlord under some has some responsibility to take care of that problem? I mean, after all, we've been known about this problem for decades.
Yes. Under Massachusetts law, as soon as a child under the age of 6 lives on the premises, the housing owner is responsible for abating the lead on the property. But we do still have a lot of properties in the New Bedford area that have not been made lead safe, and so we run into this obstacle a lot.
Mm-hmm. So because it's not lead safe, they don't rent to families with young children.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah.
Exactly. So we've had families where they're homeless because they are constantly looking for apartments, but they are frequently denied because they have young children. And I think many of us would think those are the families we want to house first because we don't want young children to be homeless. But we do see all too often that it's the most difficult kind of family to house because of this discrimination against them.
So is lead the number one lack of de-leaded apartments? Is that It's significant here in New Bedford.
It is. It is a problem in New Bedford. Yeah.
If people come to you with a complaint, what happens next?
So we get all their information. So we usually do that by phone with them, and then we, depending on the kind of complaint, we then attempt further investigation. So that might look like, seeing if the particular housing provider is doing this as a pattern. It might look that, we might look at extra documentation to support the complaint. And then we review with the client their options moving forward. So it might be, we might suggest that they file a complaint with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination or with HUD, and we might offer them legal representation with that complaint. Or we might just suggest to them that we try to coach them through working with the landlord in a more amicable basis to try to maintain that relationship and get everyone on the same page. So it ranges.
Are there other sorts of complaints that you might hear in New Bedford?
Yes. So we know that discrimination on the basis of race and national origin and sexual orientation is happening in the city. We don't get a ton of complaints about it, though, because that kind of discrimination tends to be less open. So we don't have a lot of housing providers that will say, I'm not going to rent to you because of your race, right? It's not open. But we do know, looking at data, that our communities around New Bedford are still very segregated. And so we believe, and fair housing organizations across the country believe, that at least one cause of that segregation is discrimination at the individual level that's happening.
All right. So, no. If you say we're not renting to you because of race, I mean that's a violation of fair housing laws, and
yes,
that becomes a real issue. So, what the landlords say, what do they use as an excuse?
So
what do you hear?
A lot of times, what I tell potential renters to really focus on is some other kinds of activities. So that might be warning signs for possible discrimination. So, for example, if the landlord says over the phone, yes, the apartment's still available, and let me show it to you on Saturday, and then when the person shows up on Saturday and suddenly the housing provider can see them, and suddenly the housing provider says, oh no, I just rented it, right? Like those kinds of quick changes, or suddenly the rent's going to be more, or suddenly it's not going to be available when they originally said it would. Those kinds of things tend to be red flags for possible discrimination. Not saying that happens in every case, but it is a warning sign that we suggest people look for.
Okay, so when you get a complaint like that, or the deletting problem, now the deletting problem is something that, I don't know if you turn to an enforcement agency there, but obviously, if they're not renting to families with young children, that's an issue in New Bedford, because those are folks who are looking for larger apartments and need help.
Yes.
So do you refer those complaints?
So we do try to pursue as many of those complaints as possible. Like I said before, the best agencies for us for those kinds of complaints is the Commission Against Discrimination and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We also investigate this kind of activity even without a complaint coming in, so we pursue those complaints on our own as well, to try to stop the tide of this kind of lost housing opportunity.
Is there some attempt at mediation before reporting violations?
It depends on the situation. Certainly, so we also get a number of complaints from folks with disabilities who are living in apartments but need accommodations or modifications in order to have equal access to that housing. Those kinds of cases, we do frequently try to mediate ahead of filing any complaints, because we find that a lot of times a lack of a housing provider allowing for an accommodation or modification tends to be more because of a lack of education and knowledge around their obligations. So we try to educate and then come up with a solution that works for both sides.
You're listening to Townsquare Sunday. My guest is Christina D Fonseca, the Executive Director of SouthCoast Fair Housing here in New Bedford. 257 Union Street is their address. Part of your job at SouthCoast Fair Housing is educating the community,
Yes.
holding presentations, workshops for both tenants and landlords. Is that right?
Yes. We do frequently do presentations to potential landlords, to first-time home buyers who might be thinking about buying multifamily properties. We are always available. I don't think I've ever turned down an opportunity to present to a group because we really believe that at least part of the problem of discrimination is because of a lack of awareness and a lack of knowledge. So it's definitely an essential part of the work that we do.
And obviously, if they pay attention, this is a helpful piece of information that they can get.
Yes, definitely. There's not a lot of information out there around fair housing laws, so we try to get as much out as possible.
Yeah. Do you find it's a problem to get landlords to come in?
I think that if we have,
You'd like to see more.
I would like to see more, and I think it's both sides. I think we need to do a better job of it. But I also would welcome invitations to come to already in place landlord groups.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the enforcement piece that you have some responsibility with, if in fact you find legitimate complaints. So what is that? How is that carried out? Who does it? What's your role in it?
So in Massachusetts, we're able to provide direct legal representation to victims of housing discrimination. In Rhode Island, we're not yet able to, but in Massachusetts, we are. So we tend to represent clients either sometimes we come in to prevent an eviction. Sometimes we come in at that side of things, so it might be in housing court. Sometime, and then other times we'll encourage a complainant to file an affirmative complaint, and then we work with them through that process. We really believe that the harm caused by discrimination is so steep that victims should receive some sort of compensation for that, and we also believe that as a part of any work that we do when we file complaints, we also ask that anyone that we file a complaint against ultimately gets trained so that the behavior is stopped.
What's the best advice you can give people if you think they're facing discrimination?
I would say document everything at the time that it happens. So take notes as it happens. And report it right away. We know that it's happening out there frequently. We would expect to see more complaints coming in, but I think part of people are afraid to come forward. They don't have the time, the resources. They don't want to feel responsible. They feel guilty about filing a complaint. So we just encourage you to take a first step, call my office, and then we can talk you through the next steps and make you feel comfortable. And even if you don't want to pursue a complaint, at least then we know some of what's happening on the ground, and we can take it one step further if we need to.
I want to ask you a little bit about the de-letting problem, because you say that's a problem you hear a lot in New Bedford. That's a big job for a landlord, for a property owner. It can be expensive. Is there help available for them to do that kind of work?
Yes, we would definitely like to see more help, but there is some available. So I start with probably the least amount of help first when I talk about this is you are able to get a tax credit on your state taxes for, I believe it's $500 per unit that you have made lead safe. So that's one piece. The other is if the property is in a city like New Bedford, the city itself has some programs that assist with the cost of abating the lead in the property. And for that, the best office to call for that would be the city's Office of Planning and Community Development. And then also Mass Housing also has a loan program that also can be used to that kind of work. So there are programs.
There are some agencies.
Yes.
There are some places landlords can go to get the work done.
Yes.
I know it's expensive. I know that you're not collecting. There's no rents in the property. No income coming from that property while you're doing this work. Yeah. But for the long term, you can you can rent to families and you can be compliant with the law and that's a good thing. Yeah,
it becomes a much more marketable property too.
Sure.
So I think it can pay off because your potential tenant pool also expands.
So how can people reach you? Where can they learn more about?
So they can visit us on our website, which is southcoastfairhousing.org. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. And they can always call us. The best number to call us from New Bedford is 774-473-9994. And we're happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
My guest has been Christina D Fonseca, the Executive Director for South Coast Fair Housing in New Bedford. Christina, thanks for coming in. It's been we don't, these agencies are out there. Sometimes we just don't think about reaching out. And so we're glad to have you on and have you talk about this very important problem that a lot of folks in New Bedford are facing. So good luck with this. Good luck with your efforts. And again, if you need to have the services of South Coast Fair Housing, 257 Union Street in New Bedford, that phone number again.
774-473-9994.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much.
All right. Stay with us. Townsquare Sunday returns in just one moment.